Good morning, everybody, and you're welcome to the mid-morning session, which we have themed Managing the User. Obviously, following on from a fairly electric morning of presentations this morning from a keynote with Paul Dwyer, it was interesting. He closed out with a comment that said, digitalization will continue to accelerate and change brings opportunity. And yes, for us all, opportunity is double-sided, because as we are all moving forward at pace and embracing this new digital world, the cyber criminals are also moving forward at pace as well. So over the next 90 minutes, and bringing us up to 1:15, and we invite you to stay with us as we will close out with Q&A. We have 4 presentations, and the final presentation, actually, there are 2 presenters in it. So as we move through the morning, I'll introduce each of the presenters and what their topic is. And, just to give you some oversight and just to reconfirm as per the agenda, we're delighted to have John Molloy from Zyalin. We have Carmen Oprita from Cososys. We will have a joint presentation from Troels Oerting, who is the chairman of the World Economic Forum Center for Cybersecurity. We'll also be joined by Morten from Bullwall. And it gives me immense pleasure now to kick off with Chris Giles. So Chris is Director of EMA for Inside Threat at Veriato. And Chris has had an extensive career in the cybersecurity space. He's based in London. He spent many years delivering cybersecurity solutions across public and private sector. He was part of the senior management team at Canon, and he has immense insights as to best practices, as to what's going on out there. And to the theme of this presentation, a unique time, a unique opportunity. Chris, I invite you now. The stage is all yours, sir.
Thank you, Dave, and good morning, everyone. This is entitled A Unique Time, and it truly is. So first of all, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Veriato. So Veriato has been around for a number of years. We are recognized as a global leader in our industry. We service 50% of the global technology markets, importantly in financial, health and defense markets as well. We have representation in over 110 countries. Importantly, we work closely with a lot of law enforcement agencies as well. And it's been a journey of steady progress and of improvement. We certainly work by the continual improvement motto. And most recently, for us, a really important award to pick up has been the PC Mag Editor's Choice. Get it out there, guys. We really do have a solution that it is improving all the time, and I want to talk to you about that. But first of all, I want to show you some of the questions that we get asked constantly. When the world changed back in March, companies really changed what they were asking us about. It went from the usual security questions to, who's struggling, who's detached, maybe who's on the golf course. So what we started to do was realign ourselves with some of the organizations and started having different conversations. Because you can't see your employees doesn't mean that you have to lose all visibility of them. I think up until February, 90% of conversations were about inside threat. But then, as the pandemic spread, the questions changed. First to productivity and engagement. Who are the people who are really struggling to work from home? But then on to compliance. And it's been an interesting journey for all of us. This we know. And here at Cerebral, really we've learned about ourselves as much as anything. We've been able to work with organisations because we have a very robust solution and really just a high level view of how that works. Cerebral has a management console. It's attached to a SQL database. And agents are deployed covertly and record and analyze 24 hours. Everything feeds back to the console, which means that organizations have alerts and reports at their fingertips. And, you know, the sort of things here that we're looking at. Social media. Social media, I think, for a lot of people has been a savior, and for others it's been a real bane. But like it or loathe it, include it in your in what people can do within their working day or not. You know, there's a lot to be said, and a lot does get said on social media. We're looking at application usage, different forms of messaging, people accessing perhaps solutions, systems that they never did before, searching for maybe contentious information. Maybe they're moving files around, maybe they're not really observing protocols like version control. So what Veriato is looking at is everything that goes on in the endpoint, and it's monitoring it and alerting the organization who owns the solution to the fact that, you know, there may be a problem here. And we talked about, or I talked about, you know, productivity and engagement, and how that, you know, really has created pain. Organizations who, you know, they want to trust their employees, but sometimes that's difficult. And what we're giving here is a solution that allows you to understand, you know, productivity, you know, who's thriving working at home, and who's really struggling. You know, there are distractions. I myself have a dog who loves to bark in the middle of a demo. You know, different things right now, like financial stresses, and you know, some people who maybe were the breadwinner originally now might be out of work, and the other person may have to fill that void, and the pressures are very different. So here we have a solution that IDs who's absolutely smashing it, but also maybe who's struggling, who's disengaged from an organization, you know, whose language is kind of detrimental to the relationship with their employer. It's hugely important to understand, you know, exactly what's going on within the workforce, you know, who's actually, you know, really working very hard, and who's sitting at home with Netflix on. You know, Cerebral gives you you know, a very bespoke view down to an organizational level as to what you want to track at home or in the office. You know, there's people working from all sorts of places. You know, there's one of my colleagues right now has a fantastic background of maybe snow, you know, in behind them. Sometimes it's great to see where people are, and sometimes, you know, it's of interest as an employer. You want to understand the productivity and get fine-grained control over what is being monitored. So, you know, this is totally customizable here for organizations. And one thing I would absolutely sing the praises of is psycholinguistic sentiment analysis. Not so easy to say, but actually something that really tells you if somebody is buying into you as an organization, or whether actually they're detached. You know, they're no longer calling it we as a team. They're calling it, you know, you and your mates, or they, or whatever. So actually understanding, you know, someone's feelings towards you. If I write a nice email to Dave, normally it will be, you know, dear Dave, how are you? But as soon as my language changes and Dave, mate, how's it going? You know, there may be something in that. You know, I'm not as formal as I was. So the psycholinguistic element really can, you know, can identify where disengagement exists. And then what we can do is look at actual engagement through the day, and look at people's work days, and understand, you know, who is logged in and active, who's actually logging in the morning and then disappearing off down to get 18 holes of golf in, or whatever their choice may be. You know, maybe they're having to go and take the kids somewhere, or you know, different stories from different places. But what we can start doing is then drilling down, and here we look at an accounting department, Natasha through to Samantha. They're all smashing it. But when we look at look here at Sean's got 8 hours of World of Warcraft, over 3 hours of Plant versus Zombies. Now, I'm not familiar with those personally, but led to believe they're very interesting. But you know what? As an organisation, I don't really want to be paying someone to be a World of Warcraft pro. So we can then start looking in more detail down to a very granular level at who's doing what, understanding each individual. And we can go via time as well. We can start looking at, you know what, actually, you know, between these hours, Sean has logged in, he's done this, he's looked at something, he's joined on LinkedIn, he's gone to Amazon, he's gone shopping for a bit, he's done a little work in there in between, he's bought some flowers. Someone's going to be happy, but maybe not the employer. So we're going to move on to compliance, because after the initial wave of pandemic panic came the realization that compliance may have gone out the window. And what I want to do is just give you a little example of what I mean by that. So you've got somebody who may be a support worker, an engineer perhaps, and what they're doing is in the morning they're uploading their data for the day, their client list. That's great. They know what they're doing. They know what the problems are. They know what they've got to deal with. However, whether it be a malicious turning off of the VPN, or whether it's accidental, or whether they're going somewhere where they can't reach and reconcile through the VPN, that creates a violation. They're no longer compliant. So what we do is we also have a secondary link via a URL. And what that does is it means they're forever in touch with the server. So the data is reconciling, and because of that, they become compliant again. It's a hugely different conversation from the one we used to have, but one that's very relevant right now. You know, we're getting hold of that information. We're staying in touch. So you haven't got your man there who's downloaded from his kitchen table and run off. You haven't got him disappearing off the map. You've actually got him, you know, with everything working as it should do. An inside threat, you know, inside threat is where I cut my teeth, and from all the conversations we had about inside threat years ago, now they're more about, you know, as offices were abandoned and data moved to that kitchen table or the spare room, the risk footprint grew. So customers, you know, they came full circle back and started looking again at inside threats and needed to identify what people are doing, and that's where analytics comes in, and you know, and understanding their behaviour, and also risk scoring. You know, it's for risk scoring. You know, we think of that in terms of a timeline. Earlier on, there was a figure of 2 hours and 53 minutes. That's a figure that came about before the pandemic hit, and what it related to was the amount of productive hours in an 8-hour day, you know, in a survey. And if people aren't as productive, then they're probably certainly not as careful about what's going on. So when we're looking at a risk timeline, there are really two components. It's those people, but also the data. And we look at it in 3 phases. So pre-breach, the moment of breach, and post-breach. So as time goes by without a resolution or even a revolution, the risk grows. You know, ideally, everything is stopped pre-breach. However, we're realists, you know, so if a breach does occur, you need to know immediately. Our threat hunting is identifying threats, you know, ahead of things happening and pointing to the culprits and where they sit. But you know, I think the industry standard right now is about 206 days to identify an incident, and that's wholly unacceptable. It's you know, for us, you know, we need to understand the context. We need to understand how it occurred. We need to know if there are accomplices. Inside threat, in many cases, have accomplices, ex-workers, maybe disillusioned ex-workers, friends who are maybe working in other organizations that are competitive. You know, all of these are going to create an evidence trail, and what we're going to give you is an evidence trail based on really the complete solution, the paracerebral, comes from artificial intelligence and machine learning. We watch, we analyze, we alert based on the relevant alerts for your organization or your client's organization. We can then have a look at the evidence, and or you as an organization look at the evidence and then react appropriately. So Cerebral gives you the ability to react very, very, very quickly based on an evidence trail. Hugely important. And the analyzing and the watching comes from creating baselines, comes from creating digital fingerprints with machine learning. So what I mean about that, really is that data gathering begins the second that an agent is put onto an endpoint. And a picture is built not just of the individual over a period, but also of how they sit compared to their peer group. Maybe the peer group in a location or the same job title, maybe multiple locations. It's multi-tenanted, so it could be people in very different places, or all around the world. We all sit at home or in different offices now, and we've got to be able to see everybody. And we're learning, or the system is learning, those behavioral patterns, and building that picture of exactly who's doing what, and really is constantly analyzing. And what that gives you then is the ability to understand in a workforce who the biggest risks are. If the system has a new feature in risk scoring that gives you the ability to rank users and show you really who are the people that are the needle in the haystack. Not that you now, so you don't have to just look at everyone now. It's alerting you to the fact that somebody is a big risk, and because it's alerting you as well, that gives you an edge on a compliance level, because you're then going to interrogate data once you've got a very good reason to do so. So the trends that are created in the risk score tell you who they are, and what you can then do is start going into more depth and having a look at the people and what they're doing, and understanding what the alerts are. All alerts are customizable down to an organization, or reports similarly. And here you get the information that really tells you what the problem is, what they're doing. Are they looking at contentious websites? Perhaps they're looking for a job. There are a number of indicators that tell you they're disengaged and trying to leave. So all of these put together give you risk scores and the ability to identify and act straight away when somebody is in that arena. And the alerting can be fine-tuned to financial fraud, espionage. Sometimes alerts are opportunistic. Somebody sees a quick win and takes it. We've seen organizations where leaks have been made on purpose, and we've been able to stop that from happening, particularly in law enforcement, but also in organizations where maybe some industries are hugely incestuous, and people jump from one company to another, and actually using a set of criteria relating to maybe a sales organization, you can catch the early signs and deliver them really to the administrator who can act upon that. So lists, so alerts, lists of alerts are huge, and again, customizable down to the organization. And the beauty of it all is, at the end of the day, everything is analyzed, everything is recorded in the background, and you can literally click into the solution and understand what has gone on very, very quickly. And if you want to then hand it to HR, you can go that way. If it's a legal issue, you can go that way, whatever it takes. But it gives you the ability to have some proactive responses available to you for different scenarios. And so whoever's monitoring can actually instantaneously spring into life with the relevant with the relevant reaction. So before I hand back to Dave, just realistically, this is right now this solution's time. Organizations are in contact constantly about this for the three reasons realistically that you've just seen. You know, and if you'd like to talk about it, contact me. Let's talk further. I've got a great team sitting in our booth. And thank you for listening to me. Dave Feenan.
Chris, thank you very much, and very insightful presentation on employee monitoring and how your organization is helping to manage the remote workers, especially in the current environment, because obviously there's many questions around productivity outside of compliance nightmares, and just the sheer robustness and protection, and especially the week that we're in it, as we're heading into Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So within the next 6 days, there's going to be an awful lot of, I would say, employees online shopping in a variety of different ways. So thank you very much, Chris, for your time, and just to encourage our audience to use the Q&A function that's available to you on the platform to pose questions to Chris and the rest of our presenters. So now I'm going to introduce you to John Molloy, CEO and CTO of Zyalin. John has had a phenomenal career over many, many years in the IT industry, from working with organizations like Airbus. He was the IT director at the Quinn Group. But as founder and CEO of the Zyalin Group, he is now looking at the new digital workplace. And this is what his presentation will be on, because obviously the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has fast-tracked digital transformation process in a lot of organizations. And yes, there is a difference between companies that are digitally transforming and those that are digitizing as such. But we've all been forced into rapid adoption of this new norm. And I suppose for every one of us is the challenge to deploy the right technologies and support it in a remote working environment, so that both the employees and the business and the brand as such are all protected. So John, can I invite you to the stage, sir?
Thank you very much, Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I find these very difficult. I'd much prefer to be in front of everyone, talking to everyone, or on an aeroplane, etc. But if I can give you just a quick overview of what we are and what we do. Okay, so Zyalin is first of all 100% Irish owned, okay? We have the concept that we want to build a secure network as a service within an Amazon platform and deliver it. And we deliver it primarily out to fixed line and mobile operators in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, where they can actually deploy their tailored systems and deliver individual systems to their customers. So what we do is we look at everything as being traffic, which is what most logical networking people like me do. Everything is traffic, so that if you can identify the device that's creating the traffic, you can manage the traffic. So we deliver network level internet control, endpoint device identification management. We use AI because we're taking the traffic to analyze the traffic and negate threats such as phishing or etc. We do device security, and we do some smart infrastructure for remote working. Okay, that's our buzz. The future is remote working, and I think that's what we have to address, and that's what I'd like to address in the next 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to pause on this slide. Okay, Steve Jobs, who was one of the most visionary human beings in the world, actually stated that you can never join the dots looking forward. You can only join them looking back. So does that mean that he revolutionized the iPod in the music industry because of what he saw happening with cassette, or does that mean that he saw something else that we didn't see and then created something new? Okay, but I think it's poignant, and it's important that we stop right now and try and join the dots based on what's just happened. This morning I heard it described as a black swan event. Where I come from, that's more than a black swan. That's an event that has changed our entire lives. And I think we have to reflect and now look as to how we can join the dots and build again. So if I go back to, let's say December 2019, there was a Christmas and there was other things going on. And most of the world, we were going through this digital transformation journey where we were going to deploy technology, robotics, and we're going to make our world better. It's going to affect climate change. It's going to affect the human being. It's going to affect everything that we do. Our lives are going to be better. Everything is going to be improved based on digitization. We're going to make our processes easier. And the reason we're going to do it is because we're going to make more money. We're going to be more agile. We're going to do process digitization, worker enablement, and performance management, lots and lots more. These are well quoted from Gartner and everything else. This is the journey we were on, okay? And we saw services coming into play and everything. There was a plan. There was a plan. And these things were all going to be based on cloud, collaborative video conferencing, robust next generation security systems. So there was a plan. We were going to build all these things, and ultimately in X number of years, we would have this ecosystem, which would allow us ubiquitous to connect. We have 5G coming along. We have everything in this driving us, okay? Everything that's driving us. And then all of a sudden, on the 14th of March in this country, there was an explosion. It's the only way I can describe this, because every part of our norm changed. We couldn't go to work. We couldn't shop. We couldn't travel. We couldn't play sports. We had to self-isolate and distance. Everything that we normally do, everything that we socially we communicate on, everything that we did at work, which is all about us sitting here trying to communicate with each other, had changed. If this was 2019, we'll all be in the IMI and we'd all be having a conversation. The world would be different. But now it's different. So we have to learn from what's happened, and we have to try and rebuild something that I think has to be hybrid, because personally, I can't live in this house forever. I have to go out. I think everyone feels that way. And this pandemic will change, but will something else replace it? So let's just look at what happened and then try and build back up again. I'm going to focus on one area. We can talk about lots of things that the pandemic did to us, but our homes, okay? That is a stereotypical picture. This is where we go. This is where we have our kids. I'm sitting in my house right now. My kids are upstairs studying, okay? We're all actually concentrated into this one little place right now. And this is traditionally where we went when we finished work. And now all of a sudden, it's the workplace. This is where I've been since March, actually end of February. This is our workplace. That's a total different change the way we worked previously. So COVID has fast-tracked our digital transformation. And just some statistics here, sorry, wrong screen. Okay, on the 1st of April, Zoom had 200 million calls, Zoom meetings, okay? On the 21st, it jumped to 300 million and has grown since. On the 1st of March, Microsoft reported 900 million meeting minutes in one day. In mid-April, it had 2.7 billion meeting hours in one day. Companies like DocuSign and Adobe have experienced humongous growth in the ability to digitally sign things, because we can't get to things. We have to transform. So it's totally transformed the way we do things. Forbes projected that in June, it estimated that e-commerce had grown and accelerated between 4 and 6 years. So what we thought was going to take 4 years has already happened. So we have to look at that now and try and put it all back together. So if anyone remembers the frenzy outcome in March, what we did was we get everyone home. And I've heard it said this morning, and it has to be borne in mind, the last thing we thought about was security. And we didn't think this was going to last. If we were truth, we didn't think that. We thought we'd all be back. So we had a frenzy. We all went out and we bought hardware and we put VPN clients on and we sent everyone home, because we have to keep working, because the business has to make money and everything has to keep going, okay? So then there was a lack of hardware. If you remember PC World, they sold out. Everyone sold out of hardware. So we had to then go, okay, we'll use our computers who are home. Those computers that are used by our kids, okay? Personal devices are always shared. Most VPNs, sorry, this is an important thing, okay? And a point was raised earlier on. Our infrastructure, sorry, the premise is most infrastructures that were built to support 15, 20% remote working. This firewall infrastructure now is actually being asked to support 100% of the employees. Is that feasible? Is it secure? Because of this, we've lost productivity and slow performance. I reference this one because USBs in my day, and I'm not the youngest person in the world, but USB we adapted, we block USBs, but now we got USBs sitting on our network totally open because they're in somebody's house. We've got massive exposure. The remote employee has been exposed to phishing and, you know, support, donate, etc. And we're not protecting them anymore. We have a fundamental issue, which is that our devices, be them laptops, mobiles, are connected to a public Wi-Fi service. They're connected to our home network. Our home network is a consumer product. Our home network just allows you to traverse the internet to gain access. That's what it's designed for. It's connected to the same network that the PS4 is, or the Xbox, or whatever device which is directly NATed onto the internet to perform a service, which is a huge security issue. This device is now no longer on our network, so we can't really get to it. There's huge problems. How do we get to something that is sitting in the middle of Portarlington, in Portlaoise, where we're sitting in the office in Dublin? Or we're not even sitting in the office in Dublin, we're sitting in our house in wherever. Remote workers, they're sitting there, and traditionally the IT desk, you call them, they connect it to your laptop, or they came down beside you and they provide that service. It is now increasingly difficult to do that. The support cannot be delivered to the end user the way we want. And we've disconnected ourselves from an office and ourselves. In essence, that's exactly what we've done. And it's not our fault, it's the pandemic. We have to do it. We had to scatter ourselves to where we were safe, which is our own homes. But everything that was safe is up here. So here's a little infrastructure in January 2020. Here's roughly how it was. It was perfect. IT people, we are IT people, we loved it. Everything was secure. We knew what device was on there. We knew the MAC addresses. We knew who logged in. We're all connected to Active Directory or whatever other services we had. We had a secure connection to the internet. We had these guys who were allowed to come in, and these were the policies. It controlled everything, but it was limited. But we knew everything. We sat in our offices, and that's where we were. So therefore, we knew. Today, well, today, there's nothing in the office, very limited. The infrastructure is still there, but we got this plethora of remote workers, all connected, sharing devices across televisions, PS4s, anything you like, all securely, all connected across an insecure network, into the internet, via VPN, delivering limited amount of services. Our VPNs can't cater for them. We're using up all our bandwidth. Everything is tunneling through. We have a problem that we need to look at. So we need to revisualize what is going to happen in the future, because the question is remote working the new norm? Now, there are various different ways of looking at it. I think it is. I think hopefully some hybrid solution where we can go to the office some days and work from home another day. But our own government has said, you know, it will be a constitutional right. It's referenced there that you can request to work from home. We're putting tax reliefs and various incentives to allow people to work at home. Our German colleagues have gone the other way and said that whoever's working from home because they don't buy lunch has to pay an extra 5% tax. I'm not sure how that will go down in Kerry and various different places, but we'll wait and see. But more importantly, a recent poll from NUIG on behalf of the government said 94% of our workforce would prefer to work remotely in a hybrid on an ongoing basis. So these are facts. We have to look at the facts and we have to re-engineer the way we work to facilitate these facts. So I'd like to present what I believe, or what we believe, is the new digital workplace. It has to be virtual as well as physical with the same experience. It has to be connected and always on. And the always on and connected is a two-way street. The employee needs to be comfortable and the business needs to be comfortable also, that they can see what's happening and all the things we just discussed. Has to be comfortable and convenient. If possible, portable, because we need to move and people will move. You can't get tied to one location. You have to be well supported, secure and future-proofed. So here's a couple of dots that I think we need to connect up. We need to stop thinking as an employee, as a device. We need to look at the location, okay? Because the employee has so many different devices, we have to be able to say that's a location, not an employee. We have to be able to say that that's a sub-office. And we have to rationalize how you connect a sub-office up to your network. And we have to deploy a similar or same technology that allows you to do that. We have to be able to separate the network traffic on the local location. And that's actually quite easily done. All you do is you put a small device in and you tunnel the traffic that you want from your service into your service. You have to be bi-directional because you have to be able to deliver the endpoint support to that device and update it as if it was on the LAN. So what I'm saying is we have to start envisaging extending our LAN to WAN to people. We have to be able to integrate our existing infrastructure or extend our existing infrastructure, Active Directory by way of example, to these locations. We have to make it that the user appears to be on that LAN. And we have to look to the future. And we have to look to SD-WAN and SASE. And I'm going to dwell on this for a second because Gartner reckoned that by 2024, most corporate organizations would be following a SASE model, which is basically the convergence of LAN, WAN, firewall as a service, and zero trust technology in a hybrid in the cloud. That would allow ubiquitously any device which would be identified, connect, and securely access service and deliver all the things that we want right now. But because of the pandemic, I think we have to look at this technology now. I think we have to build upon what we have as building blocks, start with VPNs, build an SD-WAN, build in services, and create a hybrid of services that will deliver this ultimate secure solution. And we need to be able to educate our employees and people at locations. We're more and more, we've put these people out, the pandemic has put these people out there. We need to connect and we need to educate them, and we need to, if at all possible, reduce the vulnerabilities that they experience. So I would preface that this is what we're looking at in the future, where we are separating the network locally. We're connecting it to both the internet and to ourselves in a SASE model, okay, and delivering it in a diverse, always-on scenario. So we can deliver support and we can also deliver security to the organization. Our company basically are network people. We put networks together and we build networks for operators that deliver services. What we do for remote working is we enable you to connect these locations up very effectively, zero touch, and immediately break that problem. Change the way we currently transmit information from the public network to a private connection off a public Wi-Fi, delivering security back into your organization. Building on top of that, delivering SD-WAN. Building on top of that, delivering other services and the ability to route and manage the traffic irrespective of where they are. So it's a journey, and we have to start the journey somewhere. I think the first thing you should do is walk over to our booth, and that'll be the first step, and allow us to just show you how we can help you build this infrastructure that is immediate, medium term, and ultimately will deliver the collective of the solution. Thank you very much indeed.
That's great, John. Thank you. Very, very insightful. And I like your concept of focusing on the location and not on the device, which makes eminent sense as such. And the multitude of locations, I think over time, if we end up in a hybrid model, that we as consumers of the technology and even our clients are going to be faced with as such. Also as well, if I could put in the shameless plug, you talked about the education piece. So obviously ourselves as the Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet, we can afford anybody who's employed in Ireland access to grant aided funding to support a part-time online masters in cybersecurity. We have certified risk officer courses as well, certified cyber risk specialist courses. So on the education side, for anybody listening out there, if you want to go to the ICT Skillnet.ie website, you will see the portfolio of solutions we have there, including access to the Cisco Networking Academy because we're an affiliated partner. So John's presentation has kind of created the segue into our next presenter, who is Carmen Oprita, the Manager and Sales and Business Development Lead at Cososys. And Carmen's going to be presenting on the streamlining for companies of the data security process in the new work from home reality. And you know, as we've been discussing this morning, and you've heard it in other breakout sessions, you heard it in Paul Dwyer's keynote as well, that, you know, today, even admins, they don't have the control that they used to have. Because to John's point about the multi-locations and the multi-devices, and, you know, the whole work from home has opened up many other challenges. And especially even for SMEs who may not have the bandwidth financially, where they're impacted at the moment because of maybe negative cash flow, because of the new way of work. Maybe they have had to actually close their business for a time period. If you look at bars and restaurants, and if you look at, you know, in essence, all the credit card machines, everything else lying around in premises. So Carmen, I'd like to invite you to the stage, and over the next 20 minutes or so, just take us on that journey, what you're seeing out there, and what insights you'd like to leave with our audience today. Carmen, stage is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation for Streamline company's data security process in the new work from home reality. So for a bit of an introduction, yeah, my name is Carmen Oprita. I'm the manager for sales and business development at Cososys. And last week I had actually my 11-year work anniversary with the company. So yeah, I'm with the company since a long time. This is a picture of me when we could attend physical events. So now obviously we are all working from home and we are attending to virtual events. So to move forward and offer a few details about our company and about our product, we at Cososys have been offering device control and data loss prevention solutions since 2004. We have an advanced data loss prevention solution compatible with Windows, Mac, and Linux. And with our solution, we are able to monitor and block peripheral devices that can be attached to any computer with the device control module. Then we are also able to encrypt USB storage devices with our enforced encryption module. We are able to monitor and block sensitive data in motion. So this we are doing with our content-aware protection module. And also we are able to detect sensitive data at rest with e-discovery. Our vision is to help organizations put an end to data leaks and data theft, and also seamless control of portable storage devices. So it was said before, things are very different this year. This is the new reality of working from home. We have all experienced it in the last months, and we have adapted to it. We have no choice. So in this presentation, we will try to detail the challenges that we have seen that our customers face in the new work from home reality. And also a few ways or a few recommendations that we have to make life easier for the IT administrators out there. So in the work from home scenario, regulatory compliances remain the same. Nothing has changed on a compliance level. This means that data protection needs to extend to outside the company. And many of our customers have unprotected intellectual property, and their users have access to a wide range of devices they wouldn't have been able to use before in the office. So you would also have unauthorized data transfers, which are easier to do. So let's see why DLP is important in this work from home scenario. In general, DLP or data loss prevention solutions address a number of issues that fall outside of the scope of a traditional data protection, such antiviruses and firewalls. And these are focusing on outside threats. DLP solutions focus on inside threats, and they monitor and control sensitive data that companies need to protect by ensuring employees cannot transfer, copy, or upload data, such as personal identifiable information. Businesses can reduce the chances of data exfiltration and data leakage. One of the biggest challenges that companies are facing when it comes to data protection are these regulatory compliances. So, for example, you've all heard about GDPR or PCI for financial industry, HIPAA for medical industry, and also others. So DLP solutions can help businesses become more compliant to these regulations by restricting unauthorized transfers. Most of data breaches that make the headlines are spectacular cyber attacks, but actually a big percent of data breaches are actually due to careless employees. So let's see some best practices on how you can protect your data. So we have put together these recommendations by studying on how big companies protect their data. It's true that a data breach suffered by a big organization like Facebook makes the headlines, but also a study by the National Cyber Security Alliance found that 60% out of the small or mid-sized companies go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. So this is not good. So these are the critical aspects that we have identified for protecting your data. Know where data is and where it's going. The use of encryption across board, protecting data in cloud, educating employees at all levels. This was also mentioned before, but it's actually very important. And creating bring your own device policies. Then now to move forward on how a DLP solution can help with compliances. So the first one that we have here is the GDPR compliance. This is valid for personal identifiable data belonging to citizens of the European Union. So obviously this applies in Ireland as well. So in the initial phases, companies can use device control solution for USB and other removable devices with the policy set on report only. So data that is being transferred outside the company is tracked and reported. We also think that businesses must also monitor users when they are transferring sensitive data like personal identifiable information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, and other confidential information. To strengthen the protection, administrators need to also take into consideration blocking unwanted file transfers, unauthorized data being copied and pasted, screen captures, and so on. And do this taking into consideration there are various transfer channels out there. And also, ideally, you would have a level of granularity for users, computers, groups. With a DLP solution, as an organization, you would be able to detect and block data transfers with data centers located in countries outside the European Union. So, for example, Dropbox. Or in case those countries fit in the adequacy level of data protection, data transfers can be allowed. Also, the next compliance that we usually encounter with our customers is the PCI compliance. This refers to financial institutions institutions. So here as well, with a DLP solution, the companies can ensure that cardholder information is identified, logged, and controlled in order to meet the PCI requirements. And in their nature, financial institutions handle a large volume of confidential data. So it's imperative to set up a protection tool to block transfers, such as these personal identifiable information, full names or home address, date of birth, and so on. Also, we find that it's essential that a multi-factor authentication process is put in place. So this will make sure that if someone gains physical access to the home office space, they will still not be able to access and transfer account data. And finally, to add one more challenge that businesses are facing, we need to speak about the accidental data loss, which unfortunately has higher chances of happening in this work from home environment. We believe that businesses need to enforce data protection policies by monitoring sensitive data in real time and preventing end users from sending it to recipients outside of the organization, posting it online, or using unauthorized third-party services to transfer or process it. We have seen that data on the move is particularly vulnerable, so it's important to protect confidential information copied to removable storage devices in order to prevent this accidental data leak. So this is why a DLP solution will provide IT administrators a full view of the location, flow, and usage of the data across the enterprise. So it becomes easier to prevent a data loss incident. A good monitoring DLP software will help organizations identify when sensitive business data leaves an organization by accident or due to negligence, so they can initiate security trainings for their employees. So based on all these challenges that we have identified, we also have a list for you on how to choose a DLP solution. Also one that would work well in this work from home environment. So first of all, it's very important that you can have a deployment suitable for the work from home situation. So you would need to have this offline deployment. Also, the devices, the computers that the employee is working on, it's a mixed environment now. It's much more diverse than it used to be. So ideally, you would have a solution which would be able to control Windows, Mac, and Linux computer. Also, again, because the employee is working on this different kinds of computers, or different than it used to be, it's important that you would have a lightweight agent, so an application that would not interfere or will not impact the employee's productivity in any way, will not slow down the computer. Also, it's important that this DLP solution will provide a zero-day support, because you have new versions for applications, you have new versions for operating systems. So it's important also that the DLP solution is providing this zero-day support for the new versions, so it's still working even after an OS upgrade. It's also important to have an easy and fast deployment. And also, when you are configuring policies, it's good if you can configure like more granular policies, for example, to have an outside network policy, or policies which take effect after outside working hours, for example. Also, it's important to have a very good and granular control for removable devices, and to be able to set in general these DLP policies in a granular way. Also, ideally, or what would be nice if you could have these predefined policies for compliance, for GDPR, for PCI, and so on. So then you can just use the predefined policies and not worry exactly how to configure a solution in order to help with compliance. Also, it comes in very handy if this DLP solution would offer detailed reports, because also this reporting part is usually important within a compliance certification. So yeah, for more details, please visit our virtual booth. I and my colleagues are happy to help if you have any business case that you have in mind in regards to data loss or in regards to a work from home environment. Or if you have any challenge in regards to this, we are happy to help and just give you our take on everything. So I will wrap up with a few conclusions. So work from home has become the new normal, at least for the foreseeable future. We all agree to that. And the vulnerabilities of endpoints are clearer than ever before. Administrators don't have the same controls than they used to have. And also, in many cases, the employees are even more careless with company data in this environment. However, with all of this said, compliance has remained the same. There have been some announcements by data protection authorities that regulations would be relaxed for a while in order to accommodate a work from home environment due to these extraordinary circumstances. But this does not mean that data protection requirements are no longer mandatory. So companies need to find a way to ensure they will meet with compliance standards, even when their employees are working from home. Also, in conclusion, to wrap up, our solution Endpoint Protector helps businesses to become compliant and also to protect their sensitive data wherever they work from. And the solution can be easily installed, set up, and deployed, which makes life easier for the IT team. And companies can easily set up policies to manage Windows, Mac, and Linux computers, and also VDI environments. So thank you very much. And over to you, Dave.
Carmen, thank you. And obviously, again, a lot of very educational insights on that session for us. You know, the concept of carelessness with company data. And I suppose even just to iterate the point, that goes down to even pen and paper. So many of us get up from a even secure desk, and yet we've notes and company data very visible to anybody else that is in the accommodation with us or that remote location. Now, it gives me immense pleasure to move to a final presentation, which is a hybrid. So let's use the phraseology that we're all using today around cloud and everything else. And over a 25 to a 30-minute time period, it's my immense pleasure to introduce Troels Oerting, the chairman of the board of the World Economic Forums for Cybersecurity. Troels is a globally recognized expert in the space with well over 30 years working in many significant roles. And Troels is going to talk to us rather than make a presentation. And as he comes to the end of that talk, he will then hand over to Morten Gammelgard, who's the Executive Vice President at Bullwall. And Morten has been in the cyberspace for the last 15 years. And what they're going to talk to and present on is how the global digitalization has taken a very fast and vast leap forward because of COVID-19. And also to look at the impact it's having on our daily lives, on cybersecurity, on privacy, and on the integrity of our businesses and everything that we even do in our own personal lives. So, Troels, if I could hand over to yourself, and then if you'd duly introduce Morten at the appropriate time, and we'll all sit back and enjoy this presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dave, and I'm really pleased to be here, and you'll appreciate that I have no presentation, so you will bear with my face, and I will try then to see if I can create a visualization of my words so you will see the pictures inside your head and not on the screen. You can also understand that I'm not a native speaker. I'm Danish by birth, and so I speak a bit not the perfect English, but on the other side, I've listened to the Irish here today, and I would also say that it has also its challenges from time to time to understand from a non-British speaker. But what I'm going to talk to you about is basically give you a bit of the helicopter perspective of what we in the World Economic Forum see as the challenges, the opportunities, and also the threat to the new world order after the pandemic. And for those of you who don't know the World Economic Forum, this is an NGO that is located in Geneva. It's mostly famous for its Davos meetings, and our partners is approximately 1,600 of the biggest companies in the world. They need to have a turnover of more than $5 billion to actually become a member. And apart from that, we also have the majority of the governments in the world, plus civil society like universities and other NGOs and academia. What we try to be is an independent, neutral platform that are trying to make the world a better place. It sounds a bit naive, but maybe sometimes it is good to be naive because, and I will explain this to you a bit later, why we think that that might be a good approach towards what we see in cyber right now. So let me give you a small flavor of what is happening before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, almost a year ago, we were in a very fast transition into the fourth industrial revolution. We digitized everything, and we did that based on 4 key drivers. The first one was mobile. We are all going to mobile and 5G. So I think that the African continent will skip the computer, basically. So mobile will change the way that we use the internet in the future. 5G is tremendous important to also utilize IoT and automation. And then secondly, we saw a huge driver in IoT. We will have approximately 55 billion devices connected to the internet in 2025. 80% of them will not communicate with a human being, but will be machine-to-machine communication. How do we actually, defend that? And how do we utilize a good system for making sure that we get the right signals through and we block the false ones? You will also appreciate that in the future, everything will be connected, everything will be sensing, everything will be stored, and everything will be used. That will give us some kind of challenges in some of the areas. I'll come back to that. The last 2 drivers are cloud, where you can now store everything. It's available, instantaneously all over the world, and then AI. So these are the 4 drivers that was driving the digital transformation before the COVID. Then suddenly we have the pandemic. It started approximately February, March this year. And since that, we have closed down the world and we've moved 1.2 billion people from working in offices to working from home. So we talk very much about working from home as a new normal. I personally think, and the forum thinks, that working from everywhere is a new normal. You will not be working in your homes. You will work in offices, in trains, beaches, summer houses, wherever. And that is the new paradigm. That this is simply the flexibility that you need now in the new future. So the pandemic created an immense, let's say, steroid push to the already very fast digital transformation, because suddenly we needed availability of internet-based services to simply continue our work. We couldn't travel, we couldn't meet, we couldn't do what we normally would do from offices, so we needed a substitution, and that was the internet. So we have seen a huge increase in the number of applications and the availability demand for the internet. This will create challenges, and let's say we will face challenges in security, in privacy, and in integrity. These 3 areas will be under immense pressure. There will be loads of good things, but the downsides will be security, privacy, and integrity. What can we believe? What can we trust? You'll also appreciate that normally a nation state like Ireland or Denmark, my own country, we have 3 areas if you are the government to deal with crime. That is prevention, protection, and prosecution. Unfortunately, due to the geopolitical instability and geopolitical tensions, prosecution doesn't work. I'm a former police officer. We don't catch any cyber criminals. So cybercrime is a risk-free crime. That actually gives the problem back to you as users. Because what happens to the law if the law cannot be enforced? You're alone in the trench, guys. You have to deal with the defense of your own data and your future. And I think that is a paradigm shift. Of course, when we have seen what we have seen during the pandemic, I'm also happy to tell you that we have a risk assessment twice a year where we ask our 1,600 CEOs what keeps you awake during night. Before the pandemic, cyber was on 3 out of the top 10. After the pandemic, I thought it would be downgraded. It's actually lifted to number 2 on the risk barometer for CEOs. And that is, I guess, because that we have this huge attack surface, which we have now in the future. Let me take 2 areas out of the attack surface, because there are many, possibilities to get into your systems. But what we have seen is a surge in crime that are looking for taking advantage of our availability, our dependency of the internet. So it's not about stealing our information. It's not about stealing our money or data or IPR or credit card information. It's simply about making sure you cannot use your internet. For that, you have ransomware. And you've seen ransomware go up like this, skyrocketing, because it is a cash cow for the criminals. And it's very, very difficult to defend against, and it's very, very easy to use for the criminals. And in the online criminal ecosystem, you have crime as a service, so you can actually download the right tools and become your own cybercrime entity. And it's not enough to be protecting at the gate, at the endpoint. You simply need something better. You also have a surge in DDoS attacks. We haven't seen it yet, but you will see that that will also attack our availability problems. So you will see that we will need tools for ransomware and also for DDoS attack. But ransomware is priority number 1, and you can see now they attacks hospitals, medical institutions, but also schools and other things, because these are good blackmail areas to start with. So I think that we will need to create a coalition of the willing who will share best practice in a number of areas. And then my second advice should be, look at the basics. Go back to the basics, cyber hygiene. Cybercrime is big business. The cyber criminals are not going to spend $1 to steal 50 cents. So if you are protected better than your neighbor, they will go to your neighbor and not to you. That is why cyber hygiene is so important. With these words, I will actually introduce one of my good friends, Morten Gammelgard, who's a fellow Dane, and he's Executive Vice President for Bullwall, I think a very good Danish cyber defense corporation that actually has a tool against ransomware. One of the few I've seen, and I must say that personally, I'm a former CISO for Barclays, I'm very impressed by the way it's dealing with ransomware. So I hope you will be similarly impressed, and I will now step back and mute myself and leave the floor to you, Morten.
Thank you very much, Troels, and thanks for giving that explanation, and that was hugely insightful. I'm going to focus the rest of this presentation on the biggest threat out there, the most damaging, the most disruptive, and by far the most costly threat to all organizations. Troels mentioned it in his presentation. It's ransomware. We all see these attacks happening all the time. We all have prevention-based security in place. And outside of being hit by ransomware, these organizations I've brought up here have a few other things in common. They're all large organizations. They have large IT security budgets, large IT security teams, and they would be running most, if not all, of the protection you see down here in the wall on the right-hand side. They would be doing penetration testing, red team exercises, staff training, and user awareness. And despite all of those efforts, the ransomware criminals have relatively easily been able to penetrate all of these organizations, place ransomware onto their systems, and encrypt most, if not all of their data before anybody was able to react. And we've got to ask ourselves, What do we need to do outside of prevention-based protection to stop this threat? Because it's clearly not working in all cases. We also see, we've seen in the last month or two, a number of different warnings come out from the likes of the G7 finance ministers, the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK, FBI, Homeland Security, and many of the cybersecurity centers around Europe. And what they're urging companies to do now is to move beyond traditional perimeter security to defend against ransomware specifically, and be able to detect and remediate malicious activity as it is conducted on the network. Of course, when the outbreak begins in a company, that means that the prevention-based security has already been bypassed and nothing has stopped this particular threat or this particular malware. So we need something that can detect the malicious activity. And of course, with ransomware, that malicious activity is to begin the encryption of files in your environment. And that is what we do specifically. But to come back to why we're failing against ransomware, or why it's not working as well as it could, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. So this is how almost all organizations globally are protecting themselves. At the perimeter level, we have an email gateway that filters out bad attachments. Fine, that is great. We have a web gateway that allows our users to securely go to the internet, and we have a corporate firewall that filters out stuff. We have a lot of VPN connections coming in and out of this at the moment with COVID users. And then behind all of that perimeter protection on the endpoints, we're running either antivirus, next-gen antivirus, or EDR solutions, so endpoint detection and response. And if we're a more advanced organization, we may be running SIEM tools, we may be running security operations centers or SOCs. We may have some behavioral technologies, AI-based technologies, or even containerization built into our defenses. And that's all good and fine. We don't replace any of these technologies. They are still needed. They stop a large percentage of the threats. The problem is that they don't stop anything. And in this picture here, we just have a lot of moving parts that organizations struggle with. And Troels touched on it a little bit with your cyber hygiene. We're all running operating systems and applications. It's software, it has vulnerabilities. We need to apply patches to all of those applications and software. And those patches need to go out to every single endpoint in the organization to be effective. On the endpoint, we're running our endpoint security, and that needs to be updated and upgraded sometimes. And that needs to go out to every single endpoint in the organization. And this, guys, takes time. If one unit out there is missing the latest signatures or the communication between an endpoint console and the client itself has broken, well, then you're not really fully protected. The users, of course, remain the weakest link here. They can still go and click on stuff or do other things that they're not meant to do despite all the user awareness training. But we're also seeing the criminals, especially the ones that are engaged with ransomware activities, start to use RDP sessions or remote desktop protocols. If a session is left unattended, they hijack that and they use that to get in. Bring your own devices, mobile devices pose a challenge. They're more difficult to place security agents on, but they can still be used to initiate an encryption attack. And then, of course, we have IoT devices such as multifunction printers or security cameras, or other IoT devices which we've seen be hijacked and used to initiate encryption attacks. So these are just some of the many, many moving parts in the organization, along with a raft of others. But we also have an adversary on the other side who's hugely financially motivated. Every time somebody pays a ransom, it's like seed funding for a small tech company. You can hire more developers, better resources, you can drive new features into your product, and make your protection better. Guess what? The criminals are using that in reverse. They're finding new ways to attack us, new ways that they can get into our environment. So we see the use of banking Trojans like Emotet, TrickBot, and similar be used. And once they have the backdoor on the system, they will quickly figure out where your key data is, where your backups are, and then they will try to brute force or social engineer or phish a password for a user. And if they get somebody with the right credentials, they would typically go and create an additional account in your Active Directory. And with the elevated privileges they get from this, they can disable all of your prevention-based security and your backups, or even encrypt that too. And by doing those two things, they make it difficult for you to see the attack when it begins, and they make it almost impossible for you to recover afterwards. We also have a number of bypasses like the replace bypass, given this is a little bit old, but it illustrates the example very well. Here, an attacker by injecting a few lines of code could completely bypass the ransomware protection in Windows 10 and all of the endpoint-based security. And you can see at the time of writing on this article, only Kaspersky and Carbon Black had modified their software to prevent this technique. And many of the vendors that we know and trust hadn't done anything at this point in time. And then we have the constant flow of new ransomware. And when a new ransomware family is released, the security industry at large doesn't have signatures for it. They don't understand what vectors it comes in by. They do not understand how it executes on the network. So in other words, we're blind to that threat to begin with. And this picture here from Virus Bulletin will repeat itself over and over. In the beginning, 0 of those prevention-based vendors will be able to detect this threat. And it could be anything from a couple of days to 40 or 50 days before everybody has protection in place. And during that time that we call the critical time gap, you think as an end user that you're protected. And you are against a lot of threats, just not the latest ransomware threats that the criminals are using to try and get at your data. An example of that could be Maze ransomware. When that first started encrypting companies in northern Italy, even 14 days after those first few organizations went down, only 15 of the prevention-based vendors had made modifications to detect this threat. And if you're bothered to look, you can go and see here in November, the age locker variant, only 1 out of the 64 engines that are now out there and being monitored by the Virus Bulletin had protection in place after 10 days. So this is a very real thing that is threatening companies a lot. We've also all seen the highly publicized event where the ransomware criminals tried to bribe an employer at Tesla $1 million basically to help them with an attack. Luckily, that Tesla employer didn't fall for that. But if somebody should in the future, it doesn't really matter how many firewalls and antivirus systems and prevention-based solutions you're running in your environment. The human is the weakest link here. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. Today, we can take a simple USB lightning cable like the one you see here, where one end goes into your mobile phone, the other end would go into your USB port on your laptop for charging the phone. We can code this with ransomware and set it to start immediately when it's plugged in, or at 2 o'clock at night, which is what happened to TravelX in the UK. They obviously have gone into administration, having lost a couple $100 million to ransomware, and their business has also been hurt because of COVID and nobody traveling anymore. But if anybody is interested later in the day, or if you come to our booth, we can demonstrate 3 different ransomware attacks. One that starts from a client, one that starts from a SharePoint site, and one that we start via a simple USB lightning cable like this. It's very interesting to see because most companies wouldn't block this in their organizations today. So the point that we're making here is that it's very difficult to do 100% prevention 100% of the time. And we need to worry about detecting the threat when it's already on the network and it's bypassed all the other tools. What we're saying here is not that you should use all of these endpoint tools. What we're saying is they all do about the same thing and are almost equally effective, but they can all also be bypassed and circumvented and fooled. And if I simulate a little bit of normal user traffic with users requesting files from a file share, in a second, a ransomware is going to come in from the internet and infect this machine here on the left-hand side. Once it's done that, it's going to head straight for the file shares and begin to encrypt up to 10,000 files a minute. And it will try to replicate itself onto the other machines to speed up the pace of the attack. And this is the exact scenario that all these organizations out there that you see in the news battle with, and they lost that battle because they couldn't react quickly enough. So what we do as a solution is, instead of focusing on the endpoint, we focus on the file shares and where the data is actually being encrypted. This little film here is just a graphical representation of a ransomware attack and how quickly it encrypts your files. And when that begins to happen, these are the questions that organizations are struggling with worldwide. I've yet to meet a company who can accurately answer what they would do to these questions if a ransomware outbreak was to occur in their environment. How would you see which files are being encrypted and where the encryption is taking place? Is it in your own data center? Is it up in the cloud in Microsoft's Azure cloud or Amazon's cloud? Is it Office 365, SharePoint, or Google Drive where the data is being encrypted? If we do not know and understand that, and we cannot identify patient zero, so we don't understand which user has been compromised and which device has initiated that attack, we have only a very, very minimal chance of stopping that ongoing encryption attack before it does irreparable damage in our environment. And please understand here that there is a big difference between an attack, which we have a number of vendors that is trying to prevent, and an actual outbreak where the malware is already inside your organization. We are that last line of defense in that latter scenario where the encryption actually begins in your environment. So to show you how we would work in the same scenario, we sit and monitor the file shares, and when the ransomware comes in a second and it begins encrypting files on the file share wherever that resides, we know which user and which device has initiated it, and we simply isolate this machine out here or the few machines that has been infected. So the benefit of doing it this way is we don't care which malware or ransomware it is. It could be WannaCry from 3 years ago, or the new Angel Locker that I just described before, or one that comes in April 2021. Ransomware always will do the same thing. It will go to your file shares and begin to encrypt your data, because that's how the criminals make the money. It will drop ransom notes on your folders to tell you where to pay the Bitcoin. So we don't care about the malware itself, what it does, how it got in. We're not dependent on signatures or any of that. And we don't care which mechanism it was used to get inside your organization. Our job is to stop that user as quickly as possible so the rest of your environment remains green and operational, and you don't have 16 days of downtime where all of your users are unable to do any work any further. So I would like to encourage all of you to make a stop at the Bullwall stand at any point today where you have time. We will do live demonstrations for you if you're interested. And we also offer to all the attendees at Cyber Expo today a free ransomware assessment in your environment. And what we do here is we come in and we simulate 3 encryption outbreaks to show whether you have any mechanisms in your current setup to determine whether they would be picked up or not. We do that first without RC enabled, and then afterwards we enable RC and do the same 3 tests again to show you the difference. And this, as you can see, will be followed by a report. Here's one we did for a UK company that was using Kaspersky AV on the endpoint, and Darktrace, which is the Ferrari of AI-based protection in their environment, and nothing that they had in their environment, including their SIEM systems, picked up the encryption simulations that we were doing. This has been a big eye-opener to almost all of the organizations that we've worked with. And trust me, you're all running user awareness training, you're running a red room test, for instance. You may be simulating events where outbreaks has happened in your environment. But there's not many companies out there that are actually able to test whether their defenses can pick up illegitimate encryption or not. And it's much, much better for you to know than it is to be blind to this threat when it begins to encrypt files in your environment. So that was all for me, Dave, and I will hand it over to you to round off the session, please.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Morten, and also to Troels. Thank you too. Very, very insightful, and obviously, again, some major takeaways for our audience today. So just in moving into the Q&A, I'd just like to suggest to our audience that by all means, the option to submit questions through the chat function is there. And also each one of our presenters has encouraged you to go visit their virtual stands in the main auditorium as well, which I'd encourage you to do, because I'm kind of conscious of time that we're getting a little bit into the late morning graveyard shift where stomachs will rumble and the demand for coffee will come up as we get close to an Irish lunchtime. And I appreciate our European colleagues are well into the afternoon, European time. So over the next 30 minutes or so, I'd like to moderate a questions and answers session. And some of the questions that have come into the chat, John, and if I could start with yourself, this question is actually directed to yourself. And it just said, John mentioned locations. So the question is, people working remotely could be working from anywhere. How can you identify and manage all of these transient locations? And surely cost is a major issue, especially for SMBs.
Okay, so sorry, our premise is that you identify them based on a device, a known device with a known MAC address that's associated with the actual client. So any of the devices that we provide, which are low cost, let's address that, low cost being an entry level is 30 odd euro. Once that connects to the internet, it authenticates against the service. And we use very simple technology called MQTT to say that is this device and here is what's allowed to connect to that device. And therefore we affect the security from whether it's a mobile phone or it's a laptop or wherever it is, and whether it's connected via a Wi-Fi connection in a hotel, whether it's connected in a coffee shop or it's connected at home, we actually know where it's coming from, and that allows us to control it. So from a cost point of view, it's actually, we built it in reaction to COVID. So we were very conscious that it has to be low cost, zero touch deployment if at all possible, and can be rolled out and plugged in, which is a service that we deliver in another part of our business, which works very effectively worldwide.
Yeah. And Chris, would you like to comment on that as well? Sorry, Chris, you're on mute.
Dave, sorry, I didn't actually hear the question. Could you repeat that for me?
Certainly, yes. So the question from the audience was that John, in his presentation, mentioned locations that people working remotely can be working from anywhere. And how can you identify and manage all of those transient locations? And obviously, surely cost is a major issue, especially for SMBs.
I think in terms of cost, there is certainly from our solution, there is no differentiating cost involved. It's an endpoint because it doesn't matter where the endpoint is, if it is in the UK, in the Philippines, in Ireland, wherever it is, it is one and the same. So there's no real difference in cost. I think the thing to think about right now is that organizations. I was talking to one particular a financial organization yesterday, and they were talking about having a lot of requests from staff to not just work from home, but members of staff who now want to move as part of the shift, if you like, in workforce, want to move to, actually one of them was in Denmark, funnily enough, and they want to work from somewhere totally different. They see it as an opportunity to do so rather than just, have the job in the City of London. I would encourage it, and for us, there's no cost, no change at all. And actually, I caught the news this morning where they were actually talking about initiatives for this to happen. I think the government of maybe the Bahamas or Bermuda this morning was saying, "Come and work here." We'll actually give you a working holiday, as it were, have 6 months in a hotel that's not normally used and they can't fill with tourists, to actually go and work from somewhere totally different. So I think there's a lot of different views, a lot of different sides to that. But listen, cost doesn't change, doesn't matter where you are.
And Troels, there's another question in here, if I could direct to yourself, and maybe Morten would come in on the question as well. A couple of people are asking about the typical financial impact of ransomware. Now, I appreciate it can be very large, and say in the organizations that the WEF is engaged with, down to more where the SMB is. But ultimately, for each organization, regardless of the financial costs, there is the cost of the brand attack and the ability to recover, which even Carmen had alluded to in her presentation. So have you any horror stories that you've seen that have come through across the jungle drums where, very kind of simplistic ransomware has just exploited systems because of a lack of ownership? Because, we talk about, cybersecurity is the responsibility of the CEO, it's not a CISO, it's not an IT problem anymore. We've identified that, yes, one of the weakest links is the user as such. So yeah, there are a couple of questions in around kind of the financial impact. So any insights on that would be immensely beneficial.
I think what we try to now teach our C-level and the board level is that you need to plan for this, because it's not about if you get hacked, it's when you get hacked. And there is a time before the big bang where you prepare from. It's this prevention, you know, it's protection, it's detection and all of this. Then you have the big bang, and you haven't prepared for, do you pay ransom, do you not pay ransom, is it legal, do you have a Bitcoin wallet, you know, who talks to the press, who does this and this and this. So I think that you need to prepare for this already now in peacetime, so to say. Those who haven't done it, and let's be honest and say, we have had a number of big Danish companies who've been hugely attacked by ransomware. I don't think that we are the only country, but we are the only country who's actually reporting it. So so everybody knows that Maersk had a big attack. It cost them $350 million, right? They had to replace 42,000 computers and more than 4,000 servers. Later ISS had, later Demand had a similar one. And it was hugely, costly on the financial side, but also on the trust side. It impacts your brand, so to say. I think we live in an age of trust. So because we give so many of our data away, there is an expectation by the customer that you keep this data safe and you do whatever you can to protect it. And every time you have one of these breaches, it just feels like you haven't done what you should. It might be unfair, but that's basically what it is. And that is why I think it's so important, first of all, to assess. Then you have a risk appetite discussion inside your company. Then you make a plan, and then you decide, 100% security, it doesn't exist and it's too expensive, forget about that. Where do I want to be with my prevention in this, and what can I, what can I, and I also still need to be a business. I cannot spend all the money on security. I also need to run my business. So it's very much a balance. But I think that you need to plan for anything, both a ransomware attack and other breaches, and do that in peacetime. Exercise it also, because I can assure you, when you have an attack, it's not when the A team is in, it's in the middle of the winter holiday on a Sunday where you cannot approach anybody, right? So you also need to have a playbook but all of this is not rocket science. You should just do it in advance. I don't know, Morten, if you have any additional.
Yeah, I can add to that, because at Bullwall, we actually have a calculator which is accessible on our website, where you can go and predict the cost of a ransomware attack to your organization. It's being used by a huge amount of companies globally with really, really good feedback. Obviously, there is the cost of downtime or the productivity loss, if you like. You have to take your number of employees. You have to see whether it's 50% or 100% of the company that goes down. You have to understand how dependent your employees are on IT system availability to be able to do their job. So a bank would be near 100%. And there's a few other parameters you put in, and then you can calculate the cost of downtime. But outside of that, you also need to consider, will I need to call in external consultants to help me clean off the malware if I can't get rid of it myself? What is it going to cost our data protection officer and the IT team to accurately report on this incident to GDPR? And of course, the big one. So if you take Travelex, they had a $1 billion turnover. If you divide that by 365 days, it's roughly 2.7 million a day. They were down for 32 days. And then you can do the math from there on. Then you have reputational damage on top of that, potential lawsuits. And I guess the end equation in all of these cases is a lot larger than most organizations realize. And if you are out there and you're big on backup and you have a cybersecurity insurance, I see no reason why you wouldn't invest a small amount of money in a last line of defense that deals with mitigating the actual outbreak and stopping the encryption before it does irreparable damage.
Yeah, and Carmen, if I could continue on from the points made by Troels and Morten there, Education is part of the process, and in your presentation today, you mentioned about policies, but policies are created, read once, signed, and probably forgotten about. So within your own organization, what are you seeing? What are your customers telling you? What are their points of pain, especially more so for an SME user and the work from home concept?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the biggest challenge that we've seen from our customers and speaking with our partners when working from home is that the IT teams were so busy with just setting that every employee or every user has a working computer, has a VPN, and then somehow data security was not among the last things they would have implemented, but it was not a priority in the beginning. So I think now that we have settled into this routine, we have realized that actually compliances are still there, data security is still very important. Still, the intellectual property for the company is very important. So then you have a mix of solutions and also internal practices that somebody would need to implement. So with educating the users, educating the management, that's also very important. But like you mentioned about policies, so we can refer to policies that are set by the company, but also policies that you can set as part of a solution in order to help you with compliance. And also these policies as part of a solution, like for example, from a DLP solution, because we come from the DLP space, they need to be adapted, they need to be granular, but they need to be adapted into this work from home environment, because what was valid before needs to be changed or is not so valid now. So yeah, there are a few things that needed to be changed in order to support data protection in the work from home environment.
So is it fair to say then that a lot of policies that companies have deployed for many, many years need to be updated to reflect the work from home or the multi-location or this hybrid model that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And John, if I could come back to you, there's an interesting question in here, and I'll open it up to the floor, but maybe start with yourself, John, because of your own background. It's around the question is, or should I say, are backups sufficient defense against ransomware?
Me?
Yes, indeed, sir. Yeah. So if you go back to your days in Airbus and Quinn and all the other job roles, you know, because we've all lived in a backup to open real tape to data cartridge, you know, as a recovery environment.
You remember Cypher 9 tracks as well, yeah? Okay, so
I do indeed.
The answer
I'm not
is
giving away age here. Yep.
Backup is a point in time.
Yeah.
Okay, so at what point is that data accurate against the ever-changing data and the point of when an attack actually took place? So whether it's, sorry, this is a personal view, where there's validity, I'm actually taken very much by Troels and the guy's solution, because there is a gap there insofar as something happens, and because data and because the internet is moving so fast and data exchange is moving fast, you invariably have to lose something. So what that something is time, and as was pointed out, it's usually on a Sunday afternoon when everyone's, you know, playing golf or whatever. So there is validity to backups, but are backups the answer to a ransomware attack? I don't personally believe so. I don't believe so. I think there's a bit missing, which is real-time backup practical? Is real-time backup off multiple devices in multiple locations? It's quite a, I think there's a threat there to ransomware that has not been addressed entirely, let's be honest. Yeah. And it changes all the time also.
Indeed, and Chris, if I could invite you in there, you're nodding quite in tune with what John was saying.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's the same with anything. You've got to make a judgment as to a point in time and the relevance of it. So I was absolutely agreeing with John there. Yeah.
Another question, Troels, if I may direct this one to you, just after coming in here, the question is, the G7 has been warning organizations that they should move beyond the traditional perimeters. And is that something that the World Economic Forum is discussing?
Yeah, it is, because I think that right now, when we discuss cyber threats, ransomware is the #1 issue. So we have established what is called the Cyber Pandemic Alliance, where we have the biggest CISOs from global companies, and they fear ransomware. Also the development of ransomware, which started just to encrypt. Now they also steal information. They do a lot of things. So you need to do something different than what we've always done. And we've always, and I still think you should continue to secure your endpoint. That's very, very, very important. Just like you will have a bouncer in front of your entry door if you haven't locked it, to see who's getting in and out. But imagine that somebody sneaks, up through a window outside the bouncer's reach and get into your building. Then you need a secondary tool. It's a bit again like if you have this smoke detector and the sprinkler, while you're trying to keep the fire out, but if it's anyway in, and that's why I think that the G7 said it's not enough to do more of what we used to do. You need to think a bit like the criminals and find a way how to bypass it. One of these tools are actually the tool that Bullwall is producing, because it doesn't look at the first line of defense. It is in, but as soon as you start encrypting, it stops that. And that is, I think, a good additional tool. This will help at least, and that is why the G7. So we are in the process now, actually expanded it to the G20. Under Saudi Arabia has the chairmanship. They're very interested in that, because they're building huge smart cities in their own countries, to see what is it that we need to do when you have a smart city where everything is connected. And then ransomware will of course be detrimental to such a city. Imagine that, to a hospital, to school, to traffic lights, to information systems, to pollution cleaning, and all of this, to operations automation. And I think that next generation will be even worse. What I forgot to say in my introduction was that we were all, taken by surprise of the pandemic, the good guys, but also the bad guys. They were also taken by surprise. But they are now actually working very closely together to take advantage of this new situation. So we haven't seen the worst yet. You will probably see something more when they take full advantage of the new wide perimeter. And so we have to think untraditionally to cope with that.
Yeah, and there's another couple of questions have come in, and if I could just maybe combine this and direct it to Morten and Carmen. The question is, why do we see so many ransomware attacks today? And are there any specific sectors more vulnerable than others to ransomware?
Well, first of all, on the first question, why we see so many, it's actually very hard to keep good cyber hygiene. There's a lot of advice out there for people that mean well, that tell companies that all you have to do is patch all of your machines and update all your security and make sure about this, that, and the other. But unfortunately, it's not that simple, and we're up against an adversary here who's very, very good at what they do and hugely financially motivated to go in. So this is the reason why we keep seeing these attacks happening. We don't have anything that stops the actual delivery of the payload of the malware. We just try to look for the malware and hope we recognize it and stop it before it gets inside the organization. We need to focus on the other side a lot more than what we do today, and I think that is exactly the same thing that Troels was just saying. If we look at sectors, it is really widespread. I mean, it can be small or large organizations, and it can be across anything. You wouldn't think that education was a particularly attractive target market for them, but it is, because there's a lot of PII information stored in universities and colleges. Anybody that has IP to protect or has personal identified information, is valuable to the criminals, because they know they can put you under GDPR pressure if they're able to encrypt that type of information. You need to report on that as soon as a file has been encrypted by ransomware and it contains PII. It's a full data breach under GDPR. You have 72 hours on the clock. What happens if you have a terabyte of data encrypted amongst 20 terabytes of good data, and a lot of the ransomware will overwrite the file and encrypt it, but it won't change the file name. So you now need to go and double click on every single file of those 20 terabytes of data to figure out what's been encrypted or not. It's not a great task to have on your hands. And this is again back to what Troels was saying, is that most organizations are really ill prepared for the actual event of the outbreak itself. All the eggs are being thrown towards prevention, and prevention ain't stopping these criminals anymore. It's that simple.
And Carmen, have you any insights on that from your own business background, please?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think Morten's replies were really good. I mean, they are the experts on ransomware. So from our experience, we've seen that any business can be a target for any cybersecurity incident, but even from an insider threat perspective, like we have it for our data loss prevention solution, because any business at one point, they have either personal identifiable information or they have intellectual property. So any type of business. I think also that bigger companies, like I mentioned in the presentation, make the headlines with these kind of events, but also let's not forget about the medium-sized businesses or even small businesses, because they are also very affected. They also handle the personal identifiable information. They also have lists of customers, for example, and they are very affected when these kind of events happen, like a data loss or an attack.
That's great. Thanks for that input. And maybe if I just come back to Chris. Chris, there's a question here just around the naivety, for a better description, if I was to use that word, that whilst an organization may have the physical laptop, desktop secured at home, the individuals are using their own personal phones, which may not be obviously be a company phone. They're accessing corporate emails, maybe not using a mobile iron solution or any of the other products that are out there. So the question is, what advice would you give to me to align the corporate IT policy with the personal IT policy, where there's actually a merger of devices occurring, and I may not even know this?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think somebody spoke earlier about PC World selling out and and devices not being available. So a lot of organizations who didn't have bring your own device policies and written into their T's and C's all of a sudden had to adjust. In terms of phones, I mean, we treat phones in exactly the same way as any other endpoint. So we have a solution that sits on all devices. But I think the biggest thing for me is an organization's own housekeeping and strategy needs to be aligned. And there's a lot of organizations who have realized that they've got this weak point. They can't, they've either not included comprehensive terms and conditions for users and their employees. Now they have to. Now you've got to have a complete end-to-end holistic policy as an organization that covers any endpoint, any eventuality. Troels said, about you will get hit. It's how you deal with that. Expect to be hit. And I think it's all in the planning. I think it's all about if you've got mobile devices, you've got to make sure you keep an inventory. If you're an IT department, you've always got to know what you have. I've seen firsthand ransomware attacks on organizations, large ones, where they have either not had company phones returned, or they've had laptops with people still on AD that left the business 2 years before. So it's Troels, I can see you agreeing with me there. It's unbelievable sometimes, and the strategy and the planning has got to be right. So it's about comprehensive strategy that is all encompassing. And if you get hit, have the plan for how you deal with it. You need to have some scenarios that if A happens, we react with B and what have you. And actually, I think Morten, you referred to insurance companies. You know, a lot of cyber risk insurers nowadays absolutely insist that you engage a PR team or a PR point. They insist that you have a 10-point plan of recovery. Otherwise, you don't get cover. Yeah. So, you know, it's about a holistic view, I think.
And the cost of those insurances are going up too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and bizarrely, there is another question in just to that very point around the concept of, like Troels talked about having the plan in place, but then the attack happens. And, you know, there are many surveys, there are many reports around the concept that, you know, X% of people would not go back to that organization. Y% would say it would be at least 6 months before they would feel confident or maybe trust them, depending on what the narrative from the point of that attack being announced. And we know of plenty of organizations who basically climbed into bed and pulled the covers over their head and hope to kind of brush it under the floorboards as such that it would actually go away. So I don't know, and I'll put it out to everybody there, and maybe starting with John, would we say, like, have you seen any very good examples, John, in your time, or have you seen some very bad examples of how to not manage PR and putting the hand up and saying, look, we've succumbed to an attack, but here's what we're doing, and your data will be protected going forward?
Touch wood, in my long life and my good Irish accent, I have avoided ransomware, and that's where I'd like to stay. So I'm in no way an expert in ransomware, so I wouldn't be in a position to actually comment on that.
Okay, can I move it on, Chris? Or
yeah, listen, yeah. I certainly contribute here because I think one of my Danish counterparts here mentioned Maersk earlier. And I think what's really important about the Maersk situation is that it wasn't only them. Actually, the other 3 biggest shipping lines in the world also got hit. So, yes, you have this terrible detrimental effect to your business. However, when you're playing on the biggest table, everyone gets hit anyway. So maybe it changes the perspective a little bit.
Yeah. And Troels, from your own point of view, you've obviously...
Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say
that actually, when you mentioned Maersk is a good example because their share prices only dropped very, very little because they actually dealt with it in a very, very good way. So they were open, they were transparent, they did what they could, and they were not trying to hide anything. So they took a very short dip. And what does that tell us? That tells us that planning of an incident is important, right? You're not going to do the planning while you are attacked and you have loads of other things to deal with. You actually take out your playbook. You know who your crisis management team are. You know who will be there. You know that they can only last for 24 hours and they need some sleep. Who will replace them? All of that. What do we do? What don't we do? And then the last thing I would say is that I've always thought of security as a positive effect to your business. It's not a cost, it's an investment, right? And if you get that across to your customers, that you actually take their security seriously, then it's an add-on, then it's a positive spin instead of being a cost center that you're just throwing money into a Bermuda Triangle and nothing comes out. And I think that we need to change the way we think at the C-level because we are digitized now. Everything is, regardless if you are producing sausages or whatever, you are an IT company. You need to deal with it in a different way. And if you want to differentiate you from the bunch, the rest of them, you take actually your privacy and your security serious.
Also, do you think taking it serious and showing the world that you are serious about it could be even a competitive advantage for organizations going forward?
Yeah, big time. That's a very good point.
Yeah, and I just have a comment has come in rather than a question, but maybe you would like to comment on it across the panel. And the comment is we need to auto-protect exfiltrated data by using at-rest data encryption for data that has left the organization. So it's come in anonymously in that sense. Has anybody any view on that? Because we did talk and
So Troels briefly alluded to the fact that ransomware attacks sometimes also steals your data and uses that as a double extortion. So if you don't pay to get your encrypted files back, then they threaten to release the data that they've lifted from your company. And there's 3 stages to a ransomware attack. There is the initial attack where they get onto your systems, which the prevention-based vendors are dealing with and should be stopping. The second phase is the data exfiltration. Here, you could be looking at things like DLP, zero trust solutions, and IPS and IDS solutions to try and stop that exfiltration. You've got to remember, if they're on your network with admin privileges, it's very difficult for you to do something to stop them from exporting that data out to the internet. And then there's the third stage, which is the actual encryption of the files itself. So that's really the 3 stages of a ransomware attack that all organizations need to deal with and think about to be effective in their responses towards it.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that contribution. Now, I'm just conscious of time. We're down to the last 4 minutes of the allocated time. So what I'd like to do is to invite each one of you individually just to put forward a synopsis or maybe an invitation to people to come to your stand during the latter half of the day. So in kind of a roundup, if I could maybe just follow the speaker presentation sequence. So maybe Chris, if I could start with you, sir, first, please.
Sure. And yeah, listen, thanks everyone for listening to what we've had to say. I think I've enjoyed it as well, and I enjoyed listening to the other speakers. It's been really really interesting. I think from our perspective, you know, we have a good history of working with organizations, protecting them from inside threat. But I think I would ask that all organizations think about not just the internal threat, but also compliance, and then also the engagement of their employees. You know, really, what are their employees doing? You know, one of the key things right now we see is not just what are they doing, but mentally, how are they? And I think for me, maybe that's an extra point.
Thank you very much, Chris. John?
Hi, guys. I just want to thank everyone. It has been very interesting. I'm just going to labor the simple point that unless we can connect everyone up, we cannot deploy anything. And that's the fundamental problem that we need to address first. And so how we're going to connect everyone up so we can do these things. And I'd ask people just literally just pop into us and let us show you how we put together a building block that says you can start here, go to here, and ultimately it will all come together. And I'd love just an opportunity to physically show you that in operation.
Yeah. Carmen, if we could turn to you now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you everyone for attending and for the great session, Dave. So again, I'd like to invite you to our booth to see how we can help organizations into navigating the work from home environment and compliances, and also carelessness for employees. So we are looking forward to seeing you there.
And if I now just call on Troels and Morten collectively to close this piece out.
2 sentences because I'm not having a booth and I'm not selling anything. So I will just say that we in the security business shouldn't sell fear. We are protecting hope. And we should actually do what we can to get that message across. We can do so, we can achieve so much by having a very, very active and well-functioning internet if we can protect it. And that is what we should do. And you have now listened to a number of people who have good tools that you should actually visit. And then I will say that humanity will survive the internet, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Morten.
Yeah, so all organizations that are present here will have a protection against a fire in their organization. There may be fire doors, fire extinguishers, and smoke detectors in the building. And essentially, you know, you need to have that. It's a law requirement. It's because human life can be lost if there's a fire in your office, and a lot of other damage can follow. However, when it comes to ransomware specifically, when you look at that, at your data, that is the fire in your data center. If all of your data is encrypted by this, you need a smoke detector and a sprinkler system that can put out that fire on the data. And if you want to see how to do that, please, you know, stop by the Bullwall booth and get a further explanation.
Yeah. Well, at this stage, I'm just going to close out, but in the usual wrap of such sessions, I think first and foremost, on behalf of all the presenters, we'd all like to congratulate Michael Conway and all the team at Renaissance for affording us the opportunity to engage in the manner that we did today. To the audience, we hope that you found some very interesting insights, some interesting takeaways as well to bring back. But obviously to take the invite to go and visit the virtual booths and that of the other exhibitors that are here today, because a lot of effort has gone in to make this quite a vibrant experience for you, so that you are, you know, you've got hope, to use Troels' words there in the last couple of minutes. And then obviously from myself and all the team at the Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet, we ourselves are immensely grateful to Michael and the team for affording us the opportunity to be the education partner in today's event. And as I said earlier, if anybody is interested, just go to the ictskillnet.ie website and you can look at all the programs that we have there to help you and your staff on that lifelong learning journey and to give you hope. To back to Troels again. So whilst we are in a virtual environment, I would invite everybody to do a kind of silent round of applause for all our presenters, to thank John, Carmen, Chris, Troels and Morten. Enjoy the rest of your day, and the next sessions will kick off at 1:30. So there's a few minutes if you want to grab a quick sandwich, cup of coffee and come back on stream as per the agenda in the main conference hall. So to the audience, thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you for the submission of the questions. Hopefully we did you justice. And from myself personally, to thank all the presenters and obviously to appreciate the preparation work that went into this and the calls over the last 2 to 3 weeks while we aligned everything else. In the background, just to thank Connor as well for being the technical support. We'd no glitches, so credit where credit's due to you, Connor. And I'll close out on that. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be resilient, be safe, you know, but be hopeful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.